All right, so welcome back to this lesson of the series about how to connect your app with Supabase and creating your first CRUD API endpoint. So we are going to see in the wake of this lesson a very important notion called one-to-many database relationship. So this is a very important notion related to SQL databases that are part and parcel of Supabase tables. And to explain you this concept, we're going to now focus on doctors. So for now, we focused on the hospital table, but now we're going to focus on the list of doctors that are listed for each of the hospitals here. So I've already added a new table called doctors, so nothing really fancy here. There's an ID defined by UID created at the built-in attributes, and also a specialty and a name. Okay. We could actually add an avatar as well, but for the sake of this demo, that will be enough for now. One specific thing that's related to this doctors table is that it's actually going to be linked to hospitals. It's actually not an autonomous, like independent table. It's a table that has a specific relationship with hospital. And this relationship is very simple. One hospital has many doctors. However, one doctor does belong to one specific hospital. That's what we call a one-to-many relationship. It's how two tables are related to each other. And the way that we can actually define from a SQL perspective this relationship is by adding what we call a foreign key inside the doctors table. What that means is that we are going to add a specific column called hospital underscore ID that is going to be directly connected to the hospital table, and where the ID of the hospital will be filled in. So for instance, in this specific example, we can see that the hospital La Riboisière from Paris does have two doctors who are Dr. Mary and Dr. John with the respective 1 and 2 IDs. So yeah, you can see here in this chart, I use integers for the IDs, but that's exactly the same notion whether you use integers or UIDs. And here we can see that Dr. Paul does belong to the hospital ID with the value 2, which corresponds to St. Thomas Hospital in London. So how can you implement such a relationship inside Supabase? This is very easy. So let's jump to the doctors table and let's add a new column. This column, as we said, we are going to use the hospital underscore ID value here. The type, well, you need to make sure that the type of the foreign key that you are adding here does match with the type that you are going to connect to via this foreign key. So in our case, if we discard this, we are going to link to the ID of the hospital here, which is a UUID. Okay, so that means that we need to make sure that this foreign key does have a UUID type. Okay, and inside Supabase you can add a foreign key here. Select the schema, so that's the public tables, and so you can reference the table that you want to connect to. So the table that you want to connect to is the hospital table here, and here you're going to directly specify the connection here. So we are inside the doctors table, okay, this one, and we are focused on the hospital underscore ID attributes, so that's the case here, and we are going to connect to hospitals.id. Right. So once this column has been successfully created, what that means is that whenever you create a new row inside the doctor's table, you can obviously add, a name. So Dr. Mary, the specialty from Dr. Mary, I think it's cardiologist. Okay. There we go. And inside Supabase, what's happening is that since there's a foreign key relationship, you can select directly a record. So you can select a record from the hospital table. As you can see, the hospital's table from this example inside this chart is different from our hospital's sample data, but that's okay. And once it is saved, you can see that the new record, so from Dr. Mary, is directly linked to the hospital_ID. So we have properly set up our one-to-many relationship between doctors and hospital. So now what we're going to do is actually basically the same thing that we did for hospital, which is basically creating those correct actions, but now for the doctor's table, okay? So again, we're going to use the same prompt here. So we're going to use the same prompt with the table doctors. We're going to copy the contents and we're going to ask Claude to implement those API endpoints. Okay, so the API endpoints have been implemented, and it actually proactively came up with a script to seed the doctor's table. So we're going to test out if that works. I mean, if that script does work, that means that obviously the API endpoints have been correctly implemented. Okay, so it seems like it was looking for specific columns here that do not exist, so I think it's going to fail. Okay, so as you can see, it's currently updating the various columns that it thought we had inside the Supabase table. Note that this is something that often happens when coming up with like CRUD actions. They don't, Claude Code don't necessarily come up with the right list of columns, but you should not panic when this happens, and you just need to either like add some more instructions, for instance, like taking a screenshot, for instance, of your columns here, or just let it like find it by themselves. So we're going to see what solution we're going to opt for in our specific case, but that's a good example that shows that it does not hit the mark right away in all cases, and you often need to play around with Claude Code as well. Okay, so it seems like the doctors have been created. Okay, yeah, some doctors have been created and they have been linked to the hospital IDs that are listed here. Okay, so that looks good. There seems to be 2 errors they need to handle. Yeah, as they said, the 2 errors come from the fact that the 2 records that were created were linked to those 2 hospitals records that I deleted in the lesson before. So normally there should be no problem with that fix. Also, something that you can see is that Claude Code proactively comes up with a documentation referencing the API endpoints that have been created, the format of input, the format of response, etc., etc. All right, so let's just make a very quick test just to verify that it works. But again, as the script did work, there's no reasons why it shouldn't work. So let's just fetch the list of doctors, and as you can see, those doctors are available. Okay, so that's great. Now, what we want just to finish up with this lesson is that, since we have all the data available here inside our tables, and even though we don't have, for instance, the avatars or maybe some other like informations that would be required for doctors to be properly displayed the same way they are displayed here, we are still going to finalize basically a very important feature of this app, which is basically listing the list of doctors for each hospital with like dynamic data coming from the Supabase table. That way, anytime I want to add manually a doctor or a hospital to the Supabase, these will be displayed dynamically to the app. So the simple way to do that is actually to say, let's now wire up the front ends with the back ends by making sure the list of doctors and hospitals that are listed is populated. The lists are populated by the newly created API endpoints. So that's basically get/API/hospitals and get/API/doctors. Yeah, again, you don't necessarily have to be that precise because, Cloud Code is supposed to understand perfectly, what API endpoints to use for, as long as you describe them, the specific feature that is in question. But, if you, the more information you provide, the more likely they are going to come up with like the right answer. So normally what it should do now, it should actually remove, these mock data and actually replace this data with like dynamic data coming from the API. Okay, so the wire up seems to have been performed. So it seems like that since we don't have any, avatar available, it's using like a mocked image basically. Actually using a Lego image. Okay, you know what, let's actually do that right away and just add like an avatar URL. So what we're going to do is that we're going to add this URL here, and we're going to ask Claude to add up mock data. So I added a avatar URL column to the doctors table. Can you fill it in with fake date and make sure to display it inside the front end. Okay, we're going to make this slight change. Okay, so it's going to perform the script here. Right, so it seems to have populated it with these images. So these are random data. Right, so it seems to have completed the tasks. So yeah, we have like those avatar URLs, and if we refresh, we should see the new correct avatars that are displayed here. We still have one remaining avatar here that is added as well. Let's actually test out that the connection between the front end and the back end does work properly by adding one doctor to the City General Hospital. So to do that, let's add a new record here. So we're going to call it Dr. John. Is going to be urologist, and we are going to attach it to an hospital ID, which is the City General Hospital. So okay, There we go. We're going to add, we're not going to add any avatar URLs for now. And what that means is that we have this new Dr. John with no avatar, so we are going to use the fallback avatar URL, and this one should be listed here. And that's the case, as you can see here. So yeah, we have properly wired up our backend inside Supabase with the front end, and we are now going inside the next lesson to understand a new type of relationships between databases that will be necessary for implementing the feature to schedule an appointment.